Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Good morning. Are we good to go with audio? Ms. Morales? Hello?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Ms. Morales, are we good to go? Okay.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and call to order the October 15th Cuyahoga County Internal Equity Commission. My name is Ted Carter, Chief of Economic Development for the county and one of the co-chairs. Let me go ahead and call the roll with everyone's permission. Director Drucker?
Present.
Director Pellom?
Present.
Director Merriman?
Present.
And Director Lockett. Okay, we have a quorum. She'll be joining us in a moment, I'm sure. So I'm going to go a bit out of order on the agenda just since I have the floor, and just go ahead and ask for the commission members to review the last committee meeting minutes. Appreciate Ms. Morales and Mr. Thomas revising the September 10th minute with the input from the commission, and then the September 24th minutes look excellent. So just want to give the commission members a chance to review those quickly and make a motion to approve. Can I get a motion, please, for the members?
So moved. David Merriman.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Minutes are approved as presented with no revisions. Thank you, Ms. Morales and Mr. Thomas, for just an excellent job in memorializing these meetings. Very important for our purposes and for the public. Just a quick update from me before I turn it over to the other commission members. Really, really pleased with the momentum we're building with this effort. I feel like tangible initiatives are underway, and that we'll speak to in a moment, but we're really getting our sea legs, and Ms. Morales is doing an excellent job of helping keeping us coordinated and advanced. So thank you all for your time and energy, and those of your staff in particular. Some quick updates. We are making progress on assuming our membership with the Government Alliance on Racial Equity. So I'm confident that by the time of our next meeting, we'll have become a member. Each of the pilot agencies that have been identified within the county have met, and each of them is underway. So great work there. The consensus I hear, Ms. Morales will go into this later in the meeting, is that each of the agencies seems to be aligned around focusing internally around our culture and getting a better understanding of that, and then doing a data and policy and program review. And so that culture, Ms. Morales will unpack that later in the meeting. We also, what we've heard, as Ms. Morales and I have met with each of the agencies, is the grace we need to have time for this process to unfold, while also recognizing that we have a deliverable due January 31st. But I'm confident with this team that we can navigate that paradox and land in a meaningful, substantive place as we continue our work. Lastly, the Citizens Advisory Council is also underway and making great progress in getting their sea legs as well. But one of their first deliverables will happen in the next 2 weeks. The legislature mandates that there be outreach to community groups. And so with the Cleveland Foundation, who is sponsoring virtually a community conversation on the subject of racial and economic equity and equality. Those will be held on Friday, October 23rd, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., Saturday, October 24th, from 12 to 1 p.m., and Monday, October 26th, from 7 to 8 p.m., and those will be virtual. We are asking members of this group, of this commission, to serve as facilitators for those meetings, and so we'd ask for volunteers for one of those. Very important to help facilitate the conversation, which would be built around 3 very simple questions and opening up dialogue with members of the community who I'm sure are going to have a lot of energy around this topic. Each of the sessions transcribed. And so we'll be looking for volunteers from our working group to assist with that. And then there'll be a report that will be curated and presented to the community. And so we'll send out an email to commission members just to validate your participation and leadership, which I think is important. It'll be a nice way to create connectivity between the internal commission and the Citizens Advisory Council, and also to hear firsthand from our residents. With that, don't have any other comments, but just really pleased today. This office is doing a partnership with the state Jobs Ohio to Work program. So they have launched a pilot program here in Cuyahoga County to identify candidates for up to 700 jobs to be hired in the manufacturing, IT, and healthcare space. That virtual job fair, the first of several, is happening this morning. So very thrilled that 60 employers have stood up and waved their hand to participate in this process. And this program intentionally focuses on underserved minority communities. So we're really looking forward to the outcomes of that program. So with that, I'll stop, turn it over to the other commission members, and we can get into the bulk of the agenda. I'll start with you, Director Drucker. You have a very tangible update for us in terms of some of the internal work that's done.
So I reviewed the tool for organizational self-assessment related to racial equity. And I'm sure that David Merriman and HHS are light years ahead of everybody else in this. But I was very impressed. I was very impressed with the tool. It's not something I'm unfamiliar with, having dealt with very similar tools in other with other employers, and I think that it is I highly recommend that we spread it out through the organization. There were two comments that I think I made to you, Ted, that really struck me with this. First, I think not only is it a self-assessment, but it's also a tool to have people focus on these issues, and it brings out what some of the major issues are in terms of racial equity, and it gives them an opportunity to focus on some of those issues. And I think secondarily, and I mentioned that to you in a follow-up email, secondarily, I think it's also a good way to make sure that our vendors are focused on the subject. We could, and I have in other instances, included like and similar questions in RFPs to ensure that the vendors that we utilize were diverse vendors, were thinking about racial equity, and it worked out successfully. I guess the largest employer that I can point to is Kaiser Permanente in Northern California, and diversity and equity are really part of their DNA because they provide healthcare to such a diverse population in such a wide area that they emphasize that in their organizational being, and so they use these self-assessment tools and like and similar tools to broadcast that through the organization and to ensure that people are culturally competent in the provision of healthcare. And I think we can do something in this realm, starting with this tool that is very similar.
Yes, but thank you very much, Director Drucker. Yes. One question for you. Let me just hold this up for members of the public so that they can at least see the product that Mr. Merriman and his team have launched at HHS, and it's a tool for organizational self-assessment related to racial equity, drafted by the Coalition of Communities of Color. I'd be interested in hearing, because this is oriented more to the HHS environment, your thoughts on how we can advance adapting it to the other agencies. And so Ms. Morales has sent this document to each of the pilot agencies, and those agencies, again, for the public are HHS, Department of Development, Public Works, and Diversity and Procurement. And then running alongside us is the Ohio Means Jobs Workforce Board, who has launched this effort in January. So any thoughts there? but a very comprehensive tool that looks at organizational readiness, temperament, culture. So it's a pretty encompassing tool.
So I think the one question I'd like to raise that may come out of that is, how do we want to deploy this? One of the recommendations was to bring executive management together to be the starting point for the self-assessment. I think the question is, and it's probably better if it's done in person rather than on these Zoom calls. But do we want to start it there? Do we want to have a task force go to individual operating departments and conduct that with their senior leadership? I think the success of this, I think, depends on how if we use this tool, on how we deploy it.
Yes, thank you. Great point, Director Drucker. I turn to Mr. Merriman and Ms. Roberts to kind of give their perspective. But one of the things that came up in the working group meeting this week is the consensus conviction that leadership had to be actively engaged in this work and reflect and demonstrate the value and openness to advancing the work. And so I think your suggestion to have leadership, however we construct that, is critical to the work, and certainly the expectation of the staff working group. So Mr. Merriman, Ms. Roberts.
Sure. So I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina in a second to share sort of the major updates. But let me just say this. The product is out. We're working on it, and I would say the principal approach that we've taken is we've asked each department to take this back and to work within their teams. And really, it is this strong commitment to have each individual organization, each agency within DHHS to do this work, because we need as much staff and as much vertical input as we possibly can. And I think, so to the greatest extent possible, we are encouraging our directors to begin to do this and to get input and to be able to ask questions back to us. This is not meant to be a test. It's an assessment, and we want there to be a lot of questions and back and forth. And so Sabrina Roberts is co-chair of the internal process that is really charging forward with this, providing leadership and project management, but also expertise. And so let me ask Sabrina to provide other updates.
Thank you, Director Merriman. Would you like me to give the full update at this point? I know I'm further down on the agenda, or just talk about the assessment?
Why don't you, I would say, do the assessment, but also I know time is tight, and I know the meeting is scheduled to go till 11, I think, on the agenda. And by the way, I do have to step off at 11. So if this goes long, Sabrina will stay on and be able to answer additional questions. And so Sabrina, it's your call.
Okay, I'll just go through the whole, just the update, and then it'll fold in with the assessment. So good morning, all. First of all, to the executive, Mr. Budish, to any council members, on my colleagues, and to the commission, and any residents that are listening. Good morning. My name is Sabrina Roberts from the Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you for the opportunity to update you with the work that's happening in our department. My colleague, Dr. Leon Harris, cannot be with us today, but I wanted to acknowledge him up front for his leadership in this work. It's a pleasure to partner with him to help move this work from concept to practice. Since the last Equity Commission meeting, we have launched our work. Our launch included communication with all of our HHS colleagues, all of our workforce. We shared the draft plan on how we would move forward with REI. And I say draft because this is a ever-moving document. As we get more people to the table, diverse groups, we will kind of massage our plan to get more input. So we do have a base plan that we've shared with you in the past. I know Dr. Harris has shared that in the past. Provided them with a timeline of all of our activities for the last 3 months. We thought it was important that they saw from the time that Director Merriman was appointed and confirmed to October, what we've been up to and what our milestones have been. And we make a commitment to do that on a quarterly basis. We also provided them with a bevy, a host of resources in the form of podcasts, articles, common definitions, so they can begin grounding themselves in what does this really mean. In order to pull the launch off, it took a team. So I want to give a special thank you to our internal group, steering, if you will, that came together within our department to help us think through some of how we would begin to communicate with our colleagues throughout HHS. So just to acknowledge them, Tina Coleman, Ashley Brown, Ann Konarski, Donna Warner-Rogers, Ryan Johnson, Stacy Garlington, Simeon Best, Paul Porter, and our newest member, Guillermo Torres. So thank you to them, because we don't do this alone. It takes a team approach. So the second part was working with our directors. We have 8 areas of work, and our directors are, let me just say, our directors know, nothing against any other department. Our directors are awesome. They deal with a lot day to day. Their response to COVID, their heavy lift every day. Yep. We have been in this discussion for longer than even the most recent legislation came up. So kudos to the staff and colleagues at HHS who have started this conversation in a serious dialogue. And thank you to Director Merriman for giving us that space and time on every senior leadership agenda to discuss this effort. But we sent out an organizational assessment to our 8 directors on October 1st, and basically just to gather baseline data on each department. It is the charge of the director, but using their team, whoever leads different sections, to come together and answer the questions. We used the STEP version, and we also turned that document that you held up, Chairman Carter, to a forms document, because we wanted it to have more of an ease for our directors. And the first 3 parts, and we use the STEP version, are easy. They're like a yes, no answer or a number. You choose a number. So the first 3 parts. Where you get more narrative and short answers in the part 4 and 5, and we broke those up into longer, more parts, so directors could start one part and come back to it. Those assessments are due on November 30th. We are giving them 2 months so they can get with their teams and thoughtfully and intentionally fill those out. The organization Coalition of Communities of Color, in their write-up about this, they talk about this is baseline data. This is to help spur the dialogue in order for us to come together and figure out where we need to move in each department. And as my colleague, Dr. Harris, mentioned to the directors when we sent the assessment out, we look forward to the responses so we can begin to identify opportunities for growth. Every department will be in different places, but we're looking at wherever they are, it's just an opportunity. So flipping on its head, some departments are like, oh, I don't think I have very much. It's okay. Not much, greater opportunity, we're calling it. So we look forward to working with our directors, our team. Our next phase is to really bring more of our workforce in this discussion. And with our internal group and steering committee, we're looking at different buckets of work and different ways that we can interface with our workforce. So that's exciting to us because that's where it begins. You can have the top down, but it really requires top down and bottom up. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now or after.
We're a little bit out of order. That's a bit of that is her update from down below, but I think Sabrina was right. There was no way to answer the assessment question without the context. So I think that was a good way to present both the context as well as to answer Jesse's questions.
Absolutely. Great job.
Ed, I've got a quick question.
Go ahead, Director Pellom.
Sabrina, you mentioned you guys sent out podcasts or sent out information links. Did you develop that and put it in a SharePoint, or is it in the intranet, or is it via email?
It's on our intranet. We sent a correspondence out, I believe, on September 28th to all HHS staff. Again, renewing our commitment and keeping engaged with them and letting them know where we were at every point in this process. It's on the intranet. It's actually quite beautiful. Shout out to the communications department for working with us to develop everything that we were conceptualizing. They put on in a beautiful fashion on the intranet for our workforce staff to see and get the podcasts, videos, book recommendations, common definitions, and that sits there for them on our HHS portion of the intranet. Yes. So shout out to the communication staff led by Deanna Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Is that something that we could see? Sorry. Is that something we could share, or maybe some access, or even just some screenshots you guys could send to or show the working group? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Director Pellom, you want to take the opportunity? Any other comments, insights while you've got the floor?
Yeah, so Public Safety and Justice Services is not designated as one of the pilot programs, but Dan McNay is on. He's in our department. He's one of the leads in the working group for us. We are going to institute and start to work. We're not going to wait until we're designated, if you will, as one of the projects. We're going to start to implement some of this as well. So we're going to be moving along and being involved and try to keep up, if you will, as much as some of the pilot projects. So, and we're going to talk about the bylaws in a little bit. That's probably my most significant update that I've got for this one.
Thank you. So I neglected to recognize the county executive at the top of the commission meeting. Mr. Executive, welcome. I would ask you to close us out at the end of our session today with any thoughts and next steps, charges that you have. And also, I see that Director Lockett, one of the commission members, has joined us. So, Ms. Lockett, good morning. We'd love to have you provide a comment or question.
I was just going to say I appreciate the work you guys are doing, and it sounds like you're moving forward nicely, and keep it up.
Okay, can you hear me? This is Director Lockett, Lenora Lockett.
Yes.
My simple comment is that we're ready to proceed and keep getting the data, making the changes that we need to make, and improvements that we need to make.
Thank you. So before we go back to Director Pellom, Ms. Roberts, just really want to thank you and Dr. Harris for your great work. You're really setting the pace for the county. And I think at the end of this, we're going to have a model that the rest of the country can follow. Just your energy, passion, authenticity is just terrific. It came through on the working group meeting earlier this morning as well. And so just thank you for that. And also want to go back to a point that Director Drucker made, is that in working with OMJ, our workforce board, their thought also, Director Drucker, is to extend this assessment to their providers. And it's something that I think the Department of Development might consider as well, leaving that to our internal working group team that is as passionate as Ms. Roberts. But I think that's an important, not only our core governmental entities, but the enabling partners that carry out our work. We have to ask them to also do this work in the context of the entire county ecosystem. So thanks for making that point, and more importantly, your endorsement of this. So now that you've endorsed it, we can kind of let it fly throughout the county and have the other agencies proceed with the active consulting work of Ms. Roberts and Mr. Harris, Dr. Harris. So Director Pellom, we'll go to agenda item 4, please.
Thank you.
5, I'm sorry.
So myself, Director Lockett, and Ms. Morales met, as well as Ms. Nelson from Law, went over some of the conversation we had on the bylaws. We went through, and there were a couple of cleanup points. Some of this dealt with the conflict of interest statement and reflecting it back to the ethics code of the county. It reflected around the clerk of the Equity Commission. I know there was some discussion on that, of what that position entailed. We cleaned that up and realized Ms. Morales is doing everything and more that position really is at the moment. So If we adopt this, I think it makes sense, and that would be my recommendation, that she be formally given that, as well as some of the cleanup for the bylaws. So there was much discussion of how often do we look at these. Do we make it 3 years? Do we make it 4 years? Do we make it 5 years? And the idea was that if we make it 3 years, what we didn't want to happen is we didn't want, as we move on and there are different county executives, because I would hope this wouldn't end just with whenever the executive decides to stop winning re-election. But as we move on, we didn't want it to get lost or a part of a transition that fell in the wayside. So we figured if we do it every 3 years, that would be in the middle of terms for executives, so that it would be one of those things that we could ensure continuity in the reviewing and keeping it fresh. So there were no major substantive changes to the last draft that we did, but I believe that we came away from this meeting believing that the bylaws were at a point that we could raise for approval at this, so we could have that first bedrock or that foundation of how we move forward and how we're organizationally structured done today. So with that, I believe Ms. Morales sent it out to everyone. Everyone's had a little bit of time to review. I would like to make a motion to approve these bylaws for the Equity Commission.
So go ahead, David. Director Merriman. Director Merriman, you're on mute.
I second the motion, and I wanted to just express gratitude for Alex helping to get this together with Jesse and others.
Thank you. So before we vote on the motion, any other comments, insights? Director Lockett, you were part of the team that advanced this. Any perspective from your vantage point? Okay, she's on mute. No, I thought I had a chance to review the document yesterday with Ms. Morales, so I thought it looked fantastic and addressed all the salient concerns. So go ahead, Director Lockett, since I see you're back on.
Sorry again. I was just stating that Director Pellom gave the best summary.
Okay, good deal. So all in favor of the adoption of the bylaws as presented? Aye.
Yeah. Aye.
Aye.
Hearing no discussion, aye. The motion passes, so the bylaws have been officially adopted. So terrific job, commission members, of getting that piece of significant administrivia out of the way and in place. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our program manager and quarterback, Kari Morales, who my partner in this work, really hasn't been here but a month, but has really dug into the county culture, organization, work, has already introduced new lexicon to the county. Community of practice is one that you'll hear over the next several commission meetings that the working group really seems to have bought into the spirit of that. And so, Ms. Morales, if you could please give us an update on the working groups, where things stand, some of your key takeaways. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Is there an echo?
Okay, you're good. Mr. Morales, you're on, you muted yourself. Mr. Morales, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now with no echo?
Now we can. Yep.
Maybe. Sorry.
Well, we couldn't hear you for the last 2 minutes. Go ahead.
So we have like 3 mics in this room. So I'm trying to navigate kind of the technology behind the streaming and everything. So I apologize for the delay. Yes, so the Equity Commission Working Group has been meeting. They've had 2 meetings past month, one on October 1st and one on Tuesday, October 13th. There were about 20 people in attendance representing several agencies across the county. The discussions have been very fruitful. This is really the beginning stages of an ongoing process. So we discussed the work plan that you all should have in front of you, and each agency will be looking at how to best assess the best approach for their respective organizations. They will identify their own milestones. Sabrina and Dr. Harris have been amazing, kind of just guiding the conversation, really providing feedback and what lessons they've been learning along the way. But we also understand the importance of that there's no silver bullet for all the agencies across the county, right? So it is critical that leadership in each agency strategically think about their process. And the working group is really built for a community of practice, really to brainstorm ideas of what can work, what is not working. And we understand that each organization provides different services, so it may look different. The metrics are also something that everyone needs to consider since they're all different measurements. A few takeaways from the conversations that we've had is, one, the importance of REI training. That was brought up multiple times as a very beginning step to make sure that everyone has common language. So what could REI training look like across the county? And I believe that we have a few people who will be looking at how much that will cost. I know Catherine Tkachuk has been playing a major role. Sabrina and Dr. Harris have been really trying to troubleshoot a strategy for that. And then another takeaway is really the messaging that needs to come from leadership, and kind of what Sabrina said it really well earlier is working from top down and bottom up. So making sure that there's messages both ways, and that has to be a mutual drive to really advance race and equity. And those are just, that was just a summary. We are hoping to meet, we have 2 meetings per month, so the pace is a little more often than the Equity Commission, and that's intentional. These are folks who do the day-to-day work in each agency, so being able to spend the next several months to really create a framework is ideal. So Health and Human Services has definitely been leading the way. I couldn't agree more. Something Sabrina said earlier that really resonated is taking it from concept to practice. I think all the other agencies are really at the concept phase yet, right? They're still trying to build their framework. And setting the pace. So we have a few, our next meeting is scheduled next 2 weeks, and we will hope to report back as the Equity Commission meets to make sure that we're making advancements. So I welcome any questions, if any.
I'll just make a comment while, go ahead, Executive, I see about this.
I have a question. You mentioned racial equity training, if I heard you correctly. I'm not sure, but I think I recall reading that the federal government said that they banned racial equity training and will take away federal money if there's any, if a group does racial equity training. I don't know exactly what the parameters. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I recall. And especially in Health and Human Services, a lot of federal money in different programs. So, is somebody looking at that?
Yeah, so Armond, it was written in very, very broad language, I think, to conceal the fact that they did not want that the purpose of the legislation was to say that you couldn't emphasize that one racial or ethnic group was was more empowered than another. I mean, it's very obtuse. It was a very obtuse piece of legislation. I think that the drafters of the legislation seem to be aimed at discussions about either reparations or the fact that people should be should feel guilty that other people were enslaved. It's a very odd piece of legislation, very poorly drafted, very poorly thought up. But I don't think that it really points to what the work that we're doing, because the work that we're doing is putting people on an equal footing. One man.
It's a great.
I concur with that, with Director Drucker's assessment. This came up in a meeting we had earlier this week with OMJ as we look creatively about how we might access funds for this effort. And so they're going to run that down as well. But since you raised it, we'll also have our law department do another review and analysis just to make sure we're not. But I agree with Director Drucker that this is really less explicitly about racial intent, but how do you have conversations in an environment where you have to talk about race and the execution of policy and data and the technology approach, language, and baseline understanding that should be applied. And so if you recall, the county did this at an executive level 3 years ago, and there's a strong conviction within the working group, which I support, that at start this work, and because our rank and file really have the desire to have these conversations, that those conversations be done with professional facilitators that can help guide the varied opinions and perspectives that people would have, but also do it in an objective, fair way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Armond, it's Matt. I just sent it around to people, the executive order. I'd say that'd be a great thing to fight over. I mean, it is, as Jesse said, it's the most, you just read it, it's the most ridiculous statement. It's just beyond belief what it is. And I don't think it's legally enforceable, and I don't think anybody intends to enforce it, but I'd love to fight that.
Yeah, but if I can also add, we've talked about this at our senior leadership meeting. I've asked each of my directors to track this with their directors associations. We have statewide associations for child support, for children and family services, for job and family services. And then we're in leadership groups with, in senior services, and then leadership groups with all of our community initiatives. And so we're tracking, looking for any direction that really shows an intent to enforce or apply this rule. Nothing has been reported back, but we'll continue to track it and let folks know if there is any sort of action proposed.
I thank you, Director Merriman, but exactly, I do want to just lean in this point for another 30 seconds, is just how strongly the team feels that this is a necessary first step as a starting point for this work. So we'll quickly tie this off from the mention that you've raised it, and then with your permission, move forward smartly, because that really will be the cornerstone between the assessment tool that I assume now will be introduced at each of the pilot agencies with this REI training that the working group would like to implement. It will be the cornerstone of the work that's reflected in the first report due by this group in January 2021. So with your permission, Exec, let me turn back to Ms. Morales to go to your next update, please.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to wrap up the working group, I know that a lot of members are listening live to this meeting, so a big thank you. I know that a lot of folks are overwhelmed with work. Pandemic adds a lot of other stresses too, and I think that a lot of us did not foresee what 2020 was really bringing. So I appreciate everyone's drive and willingness to have the conversation of what this work can really look like in a meaningful way. So thank you. for all the working group members. I will move to the next item on the agenda, which is the Equity Commission report outline. All the commissioners and everyone who had the Zoom link should have access to the report. It's just a one-pager document of really the reflection of the legislation of what the report should outline. So we have a few opening remarks from executives. And then after that is really remarks from the co-chairs and a review and summary of Equity Commission initiatives. And I think the bulk of the report should really be more of a status report or a summary of what each pilot agency has been undertaking these last several months. There is a piece of legislation that also goes back to the summary of where and how resources dedicated to equity initiatives were allocated. So that will be something that each agency will have to consider. And then analysis of initial equity results as measured against benchmarks. And I think the assessment tool will really be a key part of the report, whatever way that may look like for each respective organization. Description of how the county collected the reported data and made it accessible to the public. An update on benchmarks and description of changes in equity initiatives for the coming year. And then lastly, wrapping up the report with a 2021 approach for each agency. So that's really just a summary of what we've been thinking through as a potential outline for the equity report that's due January 31st. And again, we welcome any feedback to the outline.
I entertain any feedback from the commission members but I think this is a terrific outline that Ms. Morales has developed, and really that we want to get ahead of the work and not, so we have general consensus that this is the right approach, for the things that aren't yet ready to start drafting now. We can leave the more substantive aspects of the content to the early new year, the month of January. So would entertain a motion for adoption if there's no material feedback or comment.
Yeah, I'll move with one correction. It's due January 31st of 2021, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So with that change, I'll make the motion.
Can I, this is Lenora, I had a question. I like the overall. I'm just trying to think about how the data will flow. So you have in section 4, where you have the breakout by the pilots, where they talk about their, wait a minute, 1 second, I'm trying to get this. Sorry. Section 4, where they talk about the review and summary of the initiatives. Then you go down to summary 6, it says the analysis. So is that going to be broken out by the same 5 pilot groups?
What's your thoughts since you're raising? I like where you're going with it, Dr. Lockett. Go ahead. We're
so
open
I
to
know it's better that again, I'm just, because it's going to be different. You're going to get the initiatives, and then a section or 2 later, you're going to get the analysis. It's better to get the initiatives with the analysis right after each group, because they're going to have somewhat separate data potentially.
Yep. Agreed. So maybe what we can do is a combination is analysis against each agency. I think there'll be some summary findings and work that's not captured in the pilot agencies that we may point to that represent other parts of the county. To that point, let me just give it back to something like Pellom said, which was excellent, and really appreciate the fact that the public safety cluster is going to lean into this work in advance of being officially designated a pilot. Mr. Executive, I'd say in our working group meeting, which was really something, was really a special meeting. We were very pleased to kind of participate in here at the county. The energy around different groups approaching and attacking this work was significant. So Director Murray really seems highly energized about how to apply, even though he's not a pilot agency, to work to his agency. So there may be others. I know Director Drucker has some interesting initiatives that Ms. Morales and I have discussed with him that he's anxious to unveil in advancing the work of equity in the county. So with your permission, Director Lockett, let's include your suggestion, and we'll put a subheading under each department that reflects the departmental work against these results, but also allow for a summary section of other elements of the county that may emerge in the next 10 weeks that should be represented. Does that friendly amendment work for you?
Yes, that's fine.
Ted, can I make one small suggestion on this?
Yes, sir.
When looking at this, my only thought is maybe move section 7 above 4, because we talk about the overview, then we talk about a summary of what we're doing, and then the data is a piece of that, and then move into the initiatives to where we've talked about the steps we've taken, because the collection of data is going to feed into the initiatives that we're doing. And then we start to talk about benchmarks and the way we're going to move forward. That was my only big thought on this, is that we lay the groundwork and then we lay out what we're doing and how it measures up. So it seems a little like we're jumping back and forth on that one. If we say, here's everything we're doing, oh yeah, here's numbers, versus this is how we got the info and this is what we found.
Yep, so creating a framework for the results, and particularly the methodology for how the information and data was collected and analyzed. Yep, that makes sense.
Just checking in with team. I think Sabrina and I agree with Alex's point. It's a good point.
I agree also.
Okay. The Director Drucker.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
I'm good with it. Ms. Morales will make those adjustments to the agenda. We'll vote on the amendments that have been made so that we can lock this in coming out of this meeting and then get this formalized.
Do we need another motion on the amended?
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah.
So just to recap for the listening audience, the amendments. 1, 2, and 3, which are the purpose from the county exec, is number 1. Number 2 is statements from the equity commissioners, a review and summary of equity commission initiatives, and then moving number 7, description of how the methodology of data collection and reporting will be moved up to 4 to provide a framework of the approach the county took with respect to data. And then number 5 will be the review and summary of Cuyahoga County's equity initiative from the pilot agencies. Those agencies, again, are HHS, Procurement and Diversity, Development, Public Works, and then Ohio Means Jobs as a tandem agency. And then the next item will be a summary of where and how resources dedicated to equity initiatives were allocated. And then the next item, analysis of initial equity results as measured against benchmarks, will be a summary of countywide efforts, but under each agency there will be a specific reference to that statement. And then ending with update on benchmarks and descriptions of change in equity initiative for the coming year and the 2021 equity plan. So with that report outline flow, does that capture kind of the amendments that were made and suggested? And does everyone concur to a voice vote that that's the way we'll proceed?
I'm comfortable with that too.
Okay. Entertain a motion and then a vote if there's no further comment.
I'll make a motion to move forward with the outline of the 2021 report with the amendments as so noted by Chairman Carter.
All right, second.
All in favor? There's no further discussion. Favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Lenora, aye.
Thank you, Ms. Lockett. Okay, Ms. Morales, we got our charge, so we're on And again, I just want to really underscore, we're focused on the report, obviously, because that's the mandate we've been given by council. But this work, as it unfolds, needs time and space to breathe, to evolve. And so I love the way that the working groups and at the staff level have really emphasized the need for conversation within each agency, to structure and facilitate those appropriately, which will be part of the work of the fall and early in the next year. And then parallel to that, the data collection. And so one of the things that Ms. Morales has done with Ms. Director Tkachuk is that the data template has been sent to each agency. Each pilot agency teams are reviewing that. That will be finalized by the next working group and then presented formally as to how each agency will evolve with that data collection. And then there'll be initiatives that I know my agency is already looking at in relation to our ongoing work that will emerge during the fall. So very exciting work. I lost the agenda there. Ms. Morales, did you have any other item you wanted to speak to? Okay, well, thank you for your great work, and most importantly, just the spirit you bring to this work in multiple dimensions and intelligence and care. So great job. Clerk Bird was going to provide an update to the Citizens Advisory Council. I don't know, her chief of staff is on representing her. Ms. Black, would you like to do that, or I can cover the two items that she shared with me?
I can provide an update. Good morning.
Welcome. Good morning.
And in an effort to keep us on schedule, I'll make it very brief. The Citizens Advisory Council on Equity did hold a public meeting on September 25th, and the subcommittees have continued their work since then. As Director Carter mentioned earlier, the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity is hosting virtual community conversations later this month to hear from residents of Cuyahoga County about their experiences with racism and discrimination, and the work that can be done to help combat any inequities. Each conversation will be hosted by a facilitator and comments will be captured by a scribe. The conversations are being hosted and gathered through a Common Ground platform, which is in collaboration with the Cleveland Foundation. As Director Carter mentioned, the dates, I'll reiterate those, are Friday, October 23rd from 11 to 12, Saturday, October 24th from 12 to 1, and Monday, October 26th from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. So we do have one during morning, afternoon, weekday, as well as a Saturday, and then an evening events. Registration for the events can be found at cuyahogacounty.us/fight-racism. And that can also be found going through the landing page on the county's homepage for efforts to fight structural racism. So in addition to that work, they have also, the Citizens Advisory Council has also identified 4 major focus areas to serve as areas for subcommittees to look into. So those focus areas include criminal justice, healthcare, economic opportunity, and equitable quality of life. They have identified subcommittee members as well as chairs, and they are beginning their work assigned to each of their assigned topic areas. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Black. I would just add one comment. Director Lenora Lockett is doing a great job serving as kind of coordinator and liaison and leader to the advisor to the Citizens Advisory Council. So she and I have an opportunity to visit weekly to kind of align the work. And since this came up in the last commission meeting, we've agreed that several of the commission members, the co-chairs will be meeting with Chair Taylor and her to talk about alignment of the 2 reports and how they might interface. That meeting will occur in the next several weeks. But the focus, again, particularly given the guidance from the working group and the internal commission, is that the internal commission and our working group will work on culture of the Cuyahoga County government first, and then work toward policy and program implementation as it intersects with any recommendation or direction that the Citizens Advisory Council provides. But we still want to make sure that we're aligned and maximizing the 2 efforts. So that will be the purpose of that meeting when it's scheduled. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Mr. Executive, for any closing comments, and then make a motion for adjournment.
Again, I will just say thank you for what you're doing. Everybody on the call, I know that you all have busy jobs apart from this, and this is obviously a high priority for the county, and please keep the momentum going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Executive. And I really, the momentum and work that's been done between the last meeting has been significant, and love the energy, and I'm really looking forward to the productive and tangible programs, policies, and mindset, most importantly, that we'll be putting in place and bettering our county for everyone. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to lead in this space. So motion to adjourn. Okay, I'm just gonna adjourn. Still getting
Second.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you for your time. Great to see everybody.
Move second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Have a great day, everyone.
You too.
Thank you. Great, good meeting.
Goodbye.